The grand chamber of the Asterian compact was a monument to self-congratulation. Light from a captive star refracted through the crystalline dome, casting rainbows across the 1,000 floating thrones where the delegates of the galaxy's elder species debated the fate of lesser worlds. From my own hover seat, I, emissary Zaltar of the Cthar Republic, watched the proceedings with a familiar sense of disquiet. At the chamber's apex floated luminary Valerius, his gelatinous form, pulsing with the calm, condescending light that signified his authority. For a being with no spine, he possessed an unshakable certainty in the compact's infallibility that today's topic, as it so often was the human problem. Their energy consumption on the colony of Meridian exceeds treaty limits by a statistically insignificant 0.8%, chirped a junior delegate from the aviary guilds, displaying the data with a flutter of his feathered arms. A clear sign of their inherent disregard for established protocols. Luminary Valerius undulated with what passed for a sigh. The child species is testing its boundaries again. A minor fine will suffice. They must learn that their tantrums have consequences, however trivial. The sentiment echoed across the chamber. Child species. It was the compact's favorite descriptor for humanity. I shifted in my seat. Children, I thought, did not unify their entire planet in a series of shockingly brutal wars in less than 2 centuries. Children did not reverse engineer hyperlane technology from a single crash freighter in a single generation. The compact saw primitive upstarts. I saw a species that had perfected the art of conflict before they'd even perfected sanitation, and that thought process scared me. The debate was interrupted by a nervous-looking technician from the sensorium division. Apologies, Luminary, but we have an anomaly. Valerius pulsed with irritation. Explain. We've been tracking a low-energy transmission from the Sol system's outer asteroid belt for 3 weeks. A ghost signal. The analysts are calling it. It's untraceable, powered by no known source, yet its data structure is impossibly complex. We believe it to be a malfunction in their primitive comms network. The compact's chief xenotechnician scoffed. Or solar flares interfering with their antiquated vacuum tube hardware. It is nothing. The matter was dismissed, but a cold dread settled in my gut. Human mistakes were messy, loud, and obvious. This felt different. This felt quiet, deliberate. Seizing the lull, Ambassador Croak of the Four-Lag Hegemony lumbered forward, his heavy carapace scraping against his throne. Luminary, this talk of human defiance brings me to the colony of Elysian Fields. Its very existence is an affront to the territorial integrity of the hegemony. Their illegal expansion must be rectified. A trade sanction, perhaps? Valerius suggested, already bored. I propose a more permanent solution, Croak growled, his mandibles clicking. A decisive military action to remove the infestation. It would serve as a valuable lesson for the humans. Luminary Valerius considered this. A neat, tidy solution that would solve the Elysian Fields problem and chasten the humans in one fell swoop. An excellent proposal, Ambassador. The compact authorizes your action. I watched the predatory gleam in Croak's multifaceted eyes and felt the chill in my gut turn to ice. He did not look like a diplomat enforcing a treaty. He looked like a wolf who had just been told the sheepdog was tied up for the night. A line was about to be crossed, and I feared we had all catastrophically misunderstood which side held the chain point 3 weeks earlier. The space was the antithesis of the compact's opulence. No gold, no crystal, only the cold, blue-white light of data streams reflected on polished black surfaces. It was a place of function, of purpose, of secrets. In the center of the silent room, a single figure, Control, sat before a column of holographic light. Her face was a mask of calm, her features sharp and severe. Within the column, the flickering avatar of Pathfinder coalesced, his image staticky from a transmission crossing a dozen light years. The package has been delivered and accepted, Pathfinder reported, his voice crisp and devoid of emotion. Control leaned forward, the light catching the silver streaks in her hair. They believe the geological surveys? No questions asked. The Four-Lag are a greedy species, Control. We showed them data for an underground ocean of liquid helium-3 on Elysian Fields. They didn't just believe it, their high command is salivating. They've already rerouted 3 prospecting fleets, battle groups, by our count, to the adjacent sector. They're simply waiting for the political cover. And Ambassador Croak will provide it, Control stated. It wasn't a question. He is scheduled to propose punitive sanctions against the Elysian Fields colony at the next full compact session, Pathfinder confirmed. The motion is expected to pass without objection. The hegemony will have its pretext. A grim satisfaction settled on Control's face. For years, they had charted the compact's arrogance, modeled its corruption, and predicted its every move. Now, the final piece was sliding into place. Then the primary conditions for the Prometheus mandate are met. The aggressor has been chosen, the justification will be provided by the compact itself, and the target is set. She paused, her eyes narrowing. Is the shepherd ready for the wolves? Elysian Fields reports green across the board, Pathfinder said. The civilian population has been cycled through disaster drills for the past year. They will be in the deep-level shelters within 2 hours of the first alert. The real infrastructure, the shield grid, the energy reserves, the fleet. Cradles, is buried 3 kilometers down. The farm domes are just for show. A stage. A stage for the galaxy's most important lesson, Control murmured. She steepled her fingers, the very picture of cold, calculating patience. Let the record show, all diplomatic and non-violent solutions have been exhausted over a period of 2 standard centuries. The Asterian Compact is about to authorize an unprovoked attack on a peaceful member world. Our hands are clean. Pathfinder's avatar flickered. Final confirmation, Control? We proceed. Control looked past the hologram, her gaze fixed. On a star chart of the galaxy, a silent chessboard awaiting its first move. Let them light the spark, Pathfinder, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried the weight of generations of planning. We'll provide the inferno. The transmission ended, plunging the room back into silent darkness, leaving only the quiet hum of systems that were waiting, like their masters, for the perfect moment to reveal themselves. Elias watched his 7-year-old daughter, Maya, chase shimmering glide wings through the silver-leafed groves of Elysian Fields. Above them, the colossal agricultural domes caught the light of the system's star, their translucent panels arching into the sky like the stained glass windows of a cathedral. It was a good life, a peaceful one. The soil was rich, the air was clean, and the horrors of old Earth's history were just stories used to frighten children. Then the sky broke. There was no warning. No formal declaration, no hailing frequency opened. One moment, there was peace. The next, reality tore itself open as the jagged, insectoid ships of the Forlag hegemony ripped their way out of hyperspace. They filled the sky, blotting out the sun, their hulls absorbing the light like holes in the universe. The colony-wide disaster sirens, the ones they'd practiced with every standard month, began to wail for real. Maya? Elias screamed, scooping his daughter into his arms. She buried her face in his shoulder as the ground began to tremble. To the shelter. Now, they ran, joining a stream of other families sprinting for the reinforced blast doors of shelter. Gamma, 7. Elias risked a glance backward, and his blood ran cold. The bombardment wasn't random. A lance of violet energy, thick as a city tower, sliced down from the heavens. It didn't strike the small administration center or the spaceport. It struck AG Dome Alpha, the colony's primary grain producer. T. Watched in horror as 1 billion tons of glass and composite steel vaporized. An entire ecosystem of genetically perfected wheat, designed to feed a dozen systems, was turned to ash in a heartbeat. Another lance struck the primary water purification plant. Then another hit the protein reclamation facility. This wasn't a conquest. It was a culling. The Forlag weren't trying to capture a prize. They were methodically, maliciously, destroying their ability to live. They were salting the Earth from orbit. He stumbled through the shelter doors just as they began to grind shut, pulling Maya in with him. The heavy tungsten sealed them in, and the world became a series of shuddering impacts and the terrified sobs of his neighbors. Maya was crying, and he held her tight, whispering the empty promises a father tells his child when the world is ending. After an hour, he dared to look through a small, grimy viewport set deep into the shelter wall. He saw only fire and ruin. But then, he saw something else. Something impossible. Through the smoke, he could see the wreckage of the old orbital defense battery, a relic long deactivated by compact treaty. As he watched, the ground around it began to glow with an eerie blue light. Massive panels of earth and rock, disguised for decades, slid away to reveal armored conduits pulsing with immense, unknown power. The crippled defense battery wasn't just a ruin. It was a masquerade. Elias stared, his terror momentarily forgotten and replaced by a profound, chilling awe. The drills weren't just about hiding. Elysian Fields wasn't just a farm. It was an anchor. And the wolves, in their arrogance, had just tripped the wire. Point 3. Days later, the grand chamber of the Asterian Compact was steeped in smug satisfaction. Luminary Valerius was formally commending the Forlag hegemony for its decisive and efficient rectification of the Elysian Fields situation. Ambassador Croak accepted the praise with a series of gratified clicks, his carapace polished to a high sheen for the occasion. The general mood was one of relief, as if a persistent, buzzing insect had finally been swatted. That I sat in my hover seat, the luminary's words turning to acid in my auditory sensors. I had seen the initial, heavily redacted damage reports. Efficient rectification was a sanitized term for the systematic destruction of a world's ability to sustain life. The other delegates saw a problem solved. I saw a fuse being lit, and I could feel the heat of its approach. My unease was dismissed as typical Cthar pessimism. It was then that the chamber's protocol master announced an unscheduled diplomatic vessel arriving from the Sol system. A wave of confused murmurs rippled through the delegates. Who would the humans send? A bureaucrat to beg for aid? A diplomat to plead for leniency? The figure who strode into the chamber was neither. She was a tall woman, her face a mask of cold, controlled fury that was somehow more terrifying than any overt display of rage. She wore no diplomat's flowing robes, only a stark, black uniform adorned with a single, unfamiliar rank insignia. This was not a politician. This was a predator. I felt my primary heart skip a beat. She didn't wait for the luminary to grant her the floor. She walked directly to the chamber's center, and her voice, clear and amplified by systems that had inexplicably prioritized her, cut through the murmuring. I am Fleet Marshal Eva Rostova of the United Human Fleets. The use of the plural, fleets, was the first anomaly. We had only ever known them to have one. I am here to address the act of unprovoked barbarism committed against the human world of Elysian Fields, an act sanctioned and now celebrated by this body. Her gaze swept across the chamber, and I saw delegates shrink back from her sheer intensity. Effective immediately, humanity formally withdraws from the Asterian Compact and nullifies all associated treaties, which you have proven are worthless. Furthermore, she continued, her voice dropping but losing none of its power, we declare a state of total war against the Forlag hegemony and any and all powers who aided in their atrocity. A stunned silence fell, which was quickly broken by a wave of incredulous laughter. Luminary Valerius's form wobbled with amusement. A declaration of war? Fleet Marshal, your species possesses a handful of patrol cruisers and a barely functioning defense grid. Your most productive colony is now a sterilized rock. You have nothing left to fight with. Ambassador Croak of the Forlag joined in, his clicks echoing loudly. Your people are broken, human. Your spirit is extinguished. Who are you to make demands of your betters? I watched Rostova's face. It remained a perfect, unreadable mask. She had anticipated this. She had counted on their arrogance. And in that moment, I realized with a certainty that chilled me to my core, we were all puppets in a play she had written long ago. You have 24 standard hours, the Fleet Marshal stated, ignoring their mockery. Publicly condemn the Forlag hegemony. Formally recognize their action as a war crime. Withdraw all military and economic support. Any species that fails to meet these terms will be classified as a co-belligerent, and you will be treated as such. Luminary Valerius waved a languid pseudopod. Consider your tantrum noted. You are dismissed, Marshal. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a victory to celebrate. A flicker of something, not a smile, something colder, sharper, touched Rostova's lips. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, turned on her heel, and walked out of the chamber. The great doors slid shut behind her, leaving the delegates to their chortling and self-congratulations. I felt like I had just witnessed a death sentence being delivered, and the condemned were toasting the executioner. Aboard the Hegemon's Wrath, Overlord Tecton watched Elysian fields burn. Victory was a familiar, satisfying taste. The planet's surface was a canvas of fire and ruin, a testament to Forlag might. His subcommander approached, bowing low. Overlord, a transcript of the human marshal's outburst in the compact chamber. Tecton took the data slate and scanned the words, a low rumble of amusement building in his chest. A declaration of war, he scoffed. They have spirit, I'll grant them that. A pity we've already broken it. He tossed the slate aside. Ignore them. Continue the orbital consolidation. I want this system fully pacified by the next cycle. It was then that the senior sensor officer's station began to shriek an alarm, a high-pitched keen of pure technological terror. Sir, that ghost signal. The one the compact dismissed. What of it? Tecton demanded, annoyed at the interruption. It's back. Not as one signal, but as a matrix, a synchronized network spanning the entire sector. Its complexity is, Overlord, it's not a malfunction. It's a targeting grid. Before the words had fully registered, it happened. Space did not tear open. It unfolded. In the void where there had been nothing, now there were ships. Thousands of them. Not in a ragged fleet, but in perfect, interlocking spheres of gunmetal gray and obsidian black, surrounding his entire armada. They were brutalist, utilitarian designs, all sharp angles, weapon emplacements, and engine blocks, built not for elegance, but for violence. And then, before a single weapon was fired, the first volley was launched. It was not plasma nor kinetic energy. It was sound. For simple notes, a percussive and inescapable rhythm that slammed through the comms system, bypassing all encryption. Dum. What is that noise? Tecton snarled. Purge the channels. We can't, sir. The comms officer cried. It's everywhere. It's music. Dum. It was a hammer blow of sound, a declaration of fate knocking at the door. And as the symphony swelled, the human fleet opened fire. What the Forlag witnessed next was not warfare. It was extermination, conducted with the passionless precision of a god dissecting an insect. A human destroyer, a vessel a tenth the size of a Forlag cruiser, fired a lance of shimmering, rainbow-hued light. It passed through the cruiser's shields as if they were mist, touched the hull without a mark, and struck the reactor core within. There was no explosion. The cruiser simply ceased. Its atoms were unbound, its existence erased from the universe. They called them quantum entanglement lances, and they were impossible. Missiles streaked from human frigates, but they didn't explode on impact. They detonated just before, unleashing microsingularities that twisted spacetime itself. Forlag. Ships were not blown apart. They were crumpled like paper, crushed into hyperdense balls of wreckage by localized gravity wells that defied every known law of physics. Return fire. Fire at will. Tecton roared, but his gunners were shooting at ghosts. A human battleship would appear on their port side, and as they fired, it would flicker and vanish, a harmless projection. The real ship was already above them, its spinal cannon firing a temporal-sheath projectile that arrived at its target nanoseconds before it was even launched. The symphony of destruction continued, relentless and perfectly timed to the orchestral apocalypse flooding their comms. Tecton watched in mounting horror as his subcommander's vessel was bracketed by two human ships. They didn't fire. Instead, they projected a field that warped the very fabric of the vessel, folding it in on itself until it vanished with a sickening crunch. All fleets. Tecton bellowed into the command channel. Report. Report. The replies that came back were screams of pure panic from a dozen systems at once. It wasn't just his fleet at Elysian Fields. It was every Forlag fleet. Everywhere. Human ships had materialized in every military stronghold, over every shipyard, above every command center across the whole of the hegemony, all at the exact same instant. They were not fighting a battle. They were the subjects of a flawlessly executed, galaxy-wide decapitation. The Hegemon's wrath shuddered as a lance of quantum energy bypassed its own legendary shields. Consoles exploded. The lights flickered and died, plunging the bridge into the red glow of emergency power. The grand symphony reached its crescendo. Through the cracking viewport, Tecton saw not a human ship, but his own terrified reflection that he finally understood. He hadn't kicked a hornet's nest. He had, with the full backing of the compact, marched his people to the gates of hell and demanded entry. And the gates had just swung open, unleashing a choir of angels singing a symphony of ruin. The grand chamber was no longer a hall of power, but a cacophony of fear. Red alert holograms strobed across the faces of terrified delegates, each shouting frantic reports from their home systems. The Forlag hegemony fleet has ceased to exist as a strategic force. The commerce world's defense grid is unresponsive. Our own orbital cannons are targeting. The hive mind reports, all spawning. Fleets have been pacified. Their crews are unconscious, but alive. The reports painted a picture of impossible, absolute dominance. Human casualties were near zero. Their opponents' casualties were also bafflingly low. They weren't annihilating crews. They were dismantling war machines with the cold precision of a watchmaker. This wasn't war. It was surgery, silence. My voice, amplified by my own console, cut through the panic. The sudden quiet was more shocking than the noise had been. Every eye, every sensor, every multifaceted lens turned to me. Stop sending orders, I said, my voice heavy with the grim satisfaction of a prophet whose direst warnings have come true. Stop trying to rally fleets that no longer answer. There is nothing you can do. This was over 3 centuries ago. The battle was merely a formality. I brought up my own holographic display, overriding the frantic alerts. A single, elegant symbol appeared in the air, a stylized human hand holding a Promethean fire. They have a name for it, I informed the stunned chamber. The Prometheus Mandate. It was never a war plan. It was a protocol for revelation. I walked them through it, piece by agonizing piece. I showed them the ghost signal, overlaid with the human fleet's attack vectors, a perfect match. It was never a malfunction. It was a listening post that converted into a targeting network the moment the first Forlag weapon discharged. Then, I displayed the falsified geological surveys we had just decrypted from captured Forlag databanks. The lure of impossible riches on Elysian fields, planted by human intelligence 6 months prior. I showed them the deep scan readings of the colony itself, revealing the 3 kilometers of hardened armor and the dormant fleet cradles beneath the fragile farm domes. You see, I explained, as Luminary Valerius's form seemed to shrink, his light dimming to a pathetic glow. Humanity didn't lose a colony. They sacrificed a fortress built to look like a pawn, all to position their queen for checkmate. They knew the Forlag were too greedy to resist the bait, and they knew this compact was too arrogant to question the pretext. Deception on this scale, Valerius stammered. It is not deception, I snapped, my Cthar patience finally exhausted. It is strategy, a concept you dismissed as primitive because it didn't involve flaunting power. They didn't need to match our fleets ship for ship. They needed to create a narrative, a casus belli so righteous, so unambiguous, that the galaxy would have no choice but to see the compact for what it truly is, a corrupt, stagnant cage. You fools didn't just authorize an attack. You volunteered to be the villains in the first chapter of their new history. I let that sink in before delivering the final blow. As we speak, the captured Overlord Tecton is not being tortured. He is being educated. The humans are showing him our own internal communiques. The backroom deals. The condescending remarks. The logs where you, Luminary, and you, Ambassador Croak, planned to carve up the Forlag's new territory after they had served their purpose. Humanity is not just defeating its enemies. It is recruiting them by showing them the truth. The silence that followed was absolute. The strobing red lights of the alerts seemed to mock our paralysis. For 300 years, I said softly, my voice the only sound in the vast chamber. We wondered how we could keep humanity in their place. We are fools. We should have been asking what could possibly drive a species to such lengths. The answer is us. We did not suppress a child species. We provided the pressure, the time, and the righteous fury necessary to forge the most sophisticated and dangerous weapon the galaxy has ever known. A patient, united, and now thoroughly unbound humanity. 1 week later, the Grand Chamber was a mausoleum of galactic pride. The floating thrones, once symbols of unassailable authority, now seemed like gravestones marking the death of an era. The vibrant lights of the captive star were muted, as if the chamber itself were in mourning. The delegates were present, but their former arrogance had been replaced by a heavy, frightened silence. They were waiting for the executioner to return and read the sentence. When Fleet Marshal Eva Rostova entered, she did so with the same quiet confidence as before. This time, however, no one mistook her calm for weakness. It was the placid stillness. At the eye of a storm, a quiet that held more menace than any shout. She walked to the center of the hall, the sound of her boots on the crystalline floor echoing in the tomb-like silence. I am here to discuss the terms of the Forlag surrender and the future of interstellar relations, she began, her voice neutral. The delegates braced themselves for the conqueror's demands: planets seized, resources plundered, humiliating reparations. There will be no reparations, Rostova stated, and a wave of shock rippled through the chamber. The Forlag hegemonies, shattered fleets, and the Compact's broken pride are payment enough. Revenge is a luxury we cannot afford, and a fool's errand besides. She let the statement hang in the air before continuing. Effective today, the Astrian Compact is considered a defunct political entity. In its place, humanity invites all sovereign species to join a new body, the Galactic Cooperative. Its founding principles are simple. First, an immediate end to all technological suppression. Second, the establishment of an open-source data network for all non-proprietary scientific discovery. Third, a mutual defense pact against external threats. She paused. Membership is voluntary. However, those who choose not to join will receive no access to the cooperative's knowledge, nor its protection. It was Luminary Valerius, his form a dull, uncertain gray, who finally asked the question that burned in every mind. Why? His voice was a weak tremor. Why this elaborate, galaxy-spanning gambit? Why not simply reveal your power? Why force this conflict? Rostova's expression softened, but it was the sad, weary look of an adult explaining a harsh reality to a child. Because you were children, she said, her words echoing my own private fears. You were playing in a walled garden, so obsessed with your own petty squabbles that you refused to see the storm gathering beyond the walls. She raised her hand, and the main holographic display shifted. It showed no battle plans, no victory montages. It showed a map of the galaxy, and at its farthest edge, a shadow. It was a patch of void where there should have been faint starlight, a region of space exhibiting strange, cyclical energy readings. For a century, Rostova explained, humanity's deep-range listening posts, the ones you dismissed as primitive, have been tracking this. We do not know what it is. A species, a natural phenomenon, an engine of consumption. But we know it is vast, we know it learns, and we know it is coming. The Prometheus Mandate was never about punishing the Compact. It was about waking the galaxy up before it was too late. The air in the chamber grew cold. Your stagnation, Rostova said, her voice a surgeon's scalpel. Your suppression of progress. Your obsession with maintaining a power balance that had been obsolete for millennia. You were a liability. The galaxy's immune system was compromised by its own leadership. We required partners, not dependents. We needed brilliant scientists and hardened soldiers, not pampered elites and corrupt bureaucrats. The attack on Elysian Fields was simply the most efficient catalyst to force a change you would have otherwise resisted for another 1,000 years. She looked around the chamber, at the faces of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, now rendered utterly insignificant. So you have a choice. It is not about submitting to human rule. It is about survival. Join the cooperative. Add your knowledge, your resources, your strength. Help us prepare for the real war that is coming. Or remain here, clinging to the phantom of your authority, and face the long night alone. Rostova finished, turned, and left the chamber. This time, no one laughed. I looked at the shadow on the star map, a patch of absolute darkness that made the might of the human fleet seem like a flickering candle. And I finally understood. Elysian Fields was not the reason for the war. It was the method. Humanity's 300-year-long deception wasn't born of malice, but of a terrifying, pragmatic foresight. They hadn't just checkmated the Compact. They had overturned the entire board to prepare for a monstrous new game, one the rest of us hadn't even known we were playing. The fear of humanity I had harbored for so long evaporated, replaced by two things: a far more profound terror of what lay waiting in the dark, and a deep, grudging, and absolute respect for the species that had just ruthlessly appointed itself the galaxy's guardian.